Hi, welcome to 1500ESPN.com. I'm Derek Wetmore. This is Andrew Kramer. We're in a radio booth at TCF Bank Stadium after the Vikings lost big time to the New England Patriots in Week 2. In this video, we'll address the whole Adrian Peterson situation, how the team responded to that Sunday. We'll also talk about Matt Castle's play and the fact that he's been named already the starter for next week. And then we're also going to break down kind of the special teams lapses and some of the defensive shortcomings, how the team looked much worse against Tom Brady than it did a week ago against Sean Hill and Austin Davis. For starters, on the whole Peterson situation, he was arrested this week on child abuse charges. Has since been released, of course, but the team deactivated him for Sunday. He did not play. Matt Asiata filled in for him as the starter. The Vikings got a little bit of running game going early, but it's very clear that this team is not the same without Peterson. As far as how the team responded in the locker room and kind of emotionally, spiritually, I guess, if you want to call it that, there were several players who didn't want to comment on the situation, and others who were willing to talk said that they fully support Adrian as he goes through the situation. They've reached out with phone calls or texts saying, "Hey, we support you, man." A few players said they were praying for Adrian and his family, that they get through this legal situation and everything. Kind of a difficult situation for the Vikings to deal with, and really Mike Zimmer's first crisis as head coach of the team. Andrew, you were at the press conference. I know Zimmer didn't talk much about Peterson, but what was his sense? How did he respond to questions about his star running back?
Well, Mike Zimmer opened up his post-game press conference by saying, "I want to address the Adrian Peterson situation at a different time. Can we please talk about the game?" Well, obviously that's not going to happen when you have a room full of national and local reporters, many of which are there solely to address the Adrian Peterson situation. Mike Zimmer fielded his first two questions were about Adrian Peterson, and the third one, when someone asked, well, how could it have possibly affected the game, he shot back and said, affected the game? I'll tell you what affected the game were interceptions, penalties, turnovers. He listed off all of his team's gaffes from his head, and he clearly was very frustrated, not only with the team's play, but with our own, with us being reporters failing to go along with his line. But it's just not going to happen for a situation like this when your NFL MVP from 2012 is indicted on these kind of charges, especially when so many details of that case leak out to the public. And obviously the Texas DA in a press conference this weekend was very furious about that because he feels it hurts Adrian's chances at a fair trial, having the photos out there and some of the descriptions of these alleged abuse of his 4-year-old son. But going back to the game, Mike Zimmer basically just said that he refused to say that Peterson's absence played a big part in this team's terrible performance against the New England Patriots. However, it was obvious that it did have some kind of impact because, as we had discussed, Matt Asiata fills in, gets 13 carries for 36 yards against a defense that gave up 191 rushing yards to the Miami Dolphins a week ago. This is a unit I thought that Matt Asiata would still have success against, and he didn't, and the whole Vikings offense didn't. Obviously, they stopped running the ball in the second half because they were trailing by multiple scores and needed to catch up. But before that, they still didn't get anything going outside of that open drive where Castle went 4 for 4, 75 yards, and a 25-yard touchdown pass to Matt Asiata. After that, it was all downhill from there, and there really wasn't any bounce back for the Vikings. That was their only score of the game. They ended up losing 30-7. And a big part of it was Matt Castle's performance. Yeah. He threw 4 interceptions. That's the most for any Vikings quarterback since Tavares Jackson in 2007. Dante Culpepper also threw 4 back in 2005. But point being, there hasn't been that bad of an outing for a Vikings quarterback in 6-7 years now. So going back to that, there really wasn't much to glean positively off of this game as a whole because you have the negative light surrounding this team with the Adrian Peterson case, and then you have them go out and perform the way they did today. But what did you see from Matt's performance, Derek, and going forward, what's the outlook for the quarterback situation?
Yeah, so Zimmer, you can understand his frustration, especially given how quickly the fortunes of this team turned. Yep. I mean, this team, they looked fantastic against the Rams in Week 1. Now, I know they're subpar quarterbacks, especially compared to the great one, Tom Brady. But, I mean, just the thorough dismantling today was in polar contrast, really, to how they performed in Week 1. Off of that, I mean, Zimmer said that Castle will be his starter next week as the Vikings go to New Orleans. But he reiterated again, he holds quarterbacks to a high standard, that every position on the field has to earn their keep. Okay, that can become a coaching cliche, but given how important quarterback is, he said that he didn't consider putting Teddy Bridgewater into this game, but he just kept bringing up, as he has many times with us in the past, Andrew, said quarterback will be held to a very high standard, and Castle didn't meet even the lowest standard with his performance today. Several underthrown balls, several routes that he just missed, and the result was an ugly 30-7 loss.
Oh, it definitely was. And Vikings fans know at least a little bit about this from Castle. He's a guy that if you watched his career before in Kansas City, he's a guy that can have good games, and then when he's bad, he's bad. Mm-hmm. And last year, I believe he got in about 9 games for the Vikings. Only 3 of those he went without an interception at all. And there were a few times he had single interceptions, but some of those turned into 3 interception games, and today 4 interception games. And that's got to be troubling for a Vikings offense that looked on point in their season opener and even in the preseason. And then you get to this second regular season game against a New England defense that isn't necessarily known for being this playmaking squad, and you fail to put up more than 7 points against. But there were more troubles than the offense here on Sunday, and we'll get to those. The special teams was just terrible. I mean, it's the second game without Mike Prefer. We're not sure when he's coming back. Mike Zimmer said, as far as I know, it's still a 3-game suspension. However, the team made it clear that it could be whittled down to a 2-game suspension, meaning he could return Monday. But Mike Zimmer was not willing to give up any of that information. You can't read too much into his comments regarding that because we're not sure when Mike will be coming back. It could be tomorrow on Monday. But moving forward with the special teams units, they have a lot of issues to correct. Yeah. Chandler Jones busted through on a Blair Walsh field goal attempt just before halftime. He got by Matt Khalil and in between Corey Wooten and Matt Khalil and used his 6'5" frame to reach out and swat down the ball, which happened to just bounce right back into his hands as he's in stride for a 58-yard touchdown. That just dismantled any chance the Vikings had of staying in this game. That put them into a 24-7 hole into halftime. And Matt Castle's 2 second-half interceptions only buried them further in a game that was out of reach, like I said, after halftime.
Not only that miscue, but the Vikings also only put 9 men on the field for in a punt situation.
Yeah, Bill Belichick had a few tricks up that hoodie of his. He decided to
cut off sleeves.
He decided to. Well, no, he had the full hoodie today. Right. But he decided to leave his offense onto the field until about 10 seconds left in the play clock, and then he switched his punt team to the offense and left the Vikings kind of in a hurry mode to try and catch up with that. And one time, as Gerald Hodges told me after the game, he said, yeah, that was great. They had a good thing going there. They tried to catch us with 12 men on the field. Well, one time they only had 9 men on the field. And it's not like the Patriots turned too much into that, but still, it's just a situation where if you're the Vikings head coach, you got enough to worry about with your offensive, defensive woes, but their special teams couldn't get anything going against a superior coaching staff and on the field a superior team.
Yeah, there are enough issues to clean up after week 2, as I touched on. Incredible swing of fortunes for how great game 1 was for the Vikings and how poor they looked in game 2. They'll have a chance to correct those next week, though, in New Orleans as they go up against another great quarterback in Drew Brees. If you enjoyed any of the talking points from the video, we'll have plenty more on this on the Purple Podcast. Be sure to check out the show page at the top. Just click on shows, drag down to Purple Podcast. You'll find all of the podcasts Andrew and I have recorded on the Vikings throughout training camp, the preseason, and now regular season too. We'll have plenty more on Brady, the special teams, gaffes, the defensive shortcomings, some on the Adrian Peterson situation, and some other players too. We'll pull some bright spots out of this game.